Kristen, and you're listening to Podcast and Amplify, a podcast for women entrepreneurs who want to amplify their voice and brand through podcasting and grow a wildly successful business. I'm the executive producer and host of 2 shows and an entrepreneur, and I love helping women grow their visibility, mindset, and business to the next level. Each week, I share tips on how to launch and leverage your podcast, and I'm bringing on the very best business leaders to give you advice on how to build your business empire. Let's amplify your voice and business. Hey there, welcome back to Podcast and Amplify. I'm your host, Kristen, and today we're going to talk about how to vet your podcast guests. So when you start a podcast, you might find yourself in the position of having a lot of people reach out to you asking if they can be a guest on your show. And while this is a great problem to have, quote unquote problem, it's important to have a couple of systems in place to help you know if the person reaching out to you will be a good fit to have on your show. So you want to think about, is this person someone who can add value to my listeners? Because when you invite someone on your show, you're really inviting them into your community, and you want to make sure that they are the right fit, that they can provide value to your listeners, and that you can provide value to each other, because you really want the podcast experience to be a great experience for all parties involved. So let's dive in. Okay, so the first way that I sort of screen my potential guests is by having a form on my website. I have a link that says, if you want to apply to be on the show, click here, and it takes them to a form, and it asks a lot of screening questions. So it asks the very basic information of what is your name, share a bio, share your links. But it also asks questions like, why do you want to be on the show? What will people learn from you? What topics would you like to discuss? And which topics do they think will be relevant to my audience? So it's a really great way to collect sort of the basic information and also to ask a few more in-depth questions to help me see if this will be a great conversation, a great fit. So I recommend that you have some sort of form that helps you ask some screening questions to help you determine if this person will be a great guest on your podcast. So after the person has applied and you look at this form and looked at the information that they've included, I often like to take it to the next step if I don't know them at all, or if I have more questions that came from reading their responses. And I like to do a interview. So this is where you set up a Zoom chat for just 20 minutes, really quick, and you can learn that much more about them. You get to see if you vibe with each other, if they are someone who you can see having a 30-minute to 60-minute conversation with. I also like to use the pre-interview to come up with the topic for that episode. So some of the people who you invite onto your show, it will be very straightforward. You'll know what you're going to talk about. But some people that I know that I'm interested in talking to, I'm not quite sure what we'll talk about. Sometimes it's because that person is knowledgeable about a lot of different things. Sometimes it's because I don't know enough about the topic. I don't have as in-depth knowledge about their expertise. So the pre-interview is a great place to sort of brainstorm together what would be the right thing to talk about. You don't always need to know that from the beginning, like, I'm going to talk to this person about X topic. Sometimes that can be co-created together. And I really love that part. And I really love when that happens because it feels really organic. And those are some of the best pre-interview conversations that I've had, is where we sort of bounce ideas off of each other and then come up with a topic that feels really great. And that's such a good sign that the actual podcast interview is going to go well, because you're already vibing with this person, on the same page about what you're going to talk about, what will be of value to the listeners. So the pre-interviews I love. I don't do them all the time. I just do them when they feel right. So I recommend you just kind of feel into it and you'll know when a pre-interview is appropriate for vetting your podcast guests and when you might not need to do that extra step. Hey friends, we'll get back to the show in just a moment, but I wanted to take just a few seconds to invite you to a free workshop that I created. It's called Launch a Binge-Worthy Podcast, and it's all about helping you to create a heartfelt podcast that reaches your soul listeners and grows your business. If you want access, just go to podcastandamplify.com. It's totally free. Okay, friend, back to the show. Now, on the flip side, I also leave the pre-interview open to the fact that this might not be the right fit. And I make sure to let people know that when we're chatting, we're determining if this is the right fit. So I like to leave that door open because sometimes it's not a good fit. You hop on a Zoom call with someone and you realize, oh, maybe this person wasn't a good fit for my show after all. Maybe we don't really have anything we could talk about. And that's okay. I think as long as they know going into it that that is a possibility, then that's fine. Everyone's on the same page and you've still met another person that you can have in your network, but not necessarily have on your podcast. Okay, the third way to vet guests that I use is by doing research. And I do a lot of my research actually on Instagram, sometimes LinkedIn, but mostly Instagram because I feel like I get a real sense of who the person is, what their brand is, because I'm getting images and sometimes I'm seeing reels that they've created or lives that they've done in the past. And often they have a link to their website. So everything's kind of there. And I can get a real feel for what their brand is, who their community is, what their expertise is, obviously. And then I can go to their website. A lot of people who have been on podcasts before, they link their past podcast interviews on their website. So I can go and listen to a few minutes of that show, or if they've done speaking engagements where they've recorded them, I can go and listen to that and just really get a sense of who they are. So I would say definitely do your research. It's a great way to screen your podcast guests, see what they're about, and see kind of how they present themselves and their business to the world. And finally, I want to remind you that one of the best ways to get really great guests is to tap into your network. So I've reached out to my past clients, coaches, people that I really respect in the online space and asked them for recommendations. And the women that I've asked, they have always given me such solid, excellent guests. And I don't think I've actually ever been disappointed in someone that has been recommended to me by someone that I trust. So that's a really great way to vet your guests because you're essentially using your network to do the vetting. Your network is not going to suggest someone to you that they don't trust. So that's my fourth way to vet guests. Okay, so we've talked about having a form on your website, doing a pre-interview, doing your research, and tapping into your network. So those are 4 ways that you can vet your podcast guests and make sure that you're bringing on really aligned guests that will provide a lot of value to your listeners, that you'll have a connection with and similar communities that you can both leverage, because podcast guest experiences are great for the host and the guest. They should be sort of a mutually beneficial experience. And that's all I have for you today. So if you found this episode helpful, please share it with one of your biz besties. And please take a moment to leave a review. It is one of the best ways to help support this podcast and its growth. And I appreciate every review. I read every single one. And if you would like help launching your heart-centered podcast to grow your audience full of potential clients, to grow your business, I'm here to help you do that. You can message me on Instagram or send me an email, and I'd love to talk to you about how we can work together. I've actually just revamped my VIP experience, which I'm so excited about. And so if you are interested in a done with you experience, where you get your fabulous podcast started and launched with guidance from me, like I said, reach out to me. I'd love to chat with you about that. And that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll catch you next week. If you loved today's episode, please subscribe so you don't miss a show. And rating and reviewing this podcast is the best way to help support us. Always remember, your voice and what you have to offer is needed in the world. Until next week, take care.